Our next presenters, and we have a duo, hail from the southern region. Jessica Parsons serves as Associate Dean of Communications and Instructional Assistant Professor of Honors at the Sally McDonnell Barksdale Honors College at the University of Mississippi. She earned a bachelor's degree in English at Harding University and her master's and doctorate degrees in higher education at the University of Mississippi. Kay Thomas is Clinical Associate Professor and Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Diversity Officer in the South Carolina Honors College. In this role, she teaches courses on leadership, social and cultural capital. She oversees honors advisement, the senior thesis process, and student service staff. Additionally, she academically advises honor students in various disciplines and the South Carolina Black Honors Caucus. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Parsons and Dr. Thomas.
Good afternoon. Let's see, we don't see our presentation, just awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I feel like we're almost like family in here, so I just need someone who can volunteer to maybe take a picture of me so I can send it to my parents, let them know I still have a job and I am not at Disney World down here. So if you come up in the field of higher ed and your parents are still like, so what do you do again? You know, so I still have that. But anyway, I just thought I'd use that as an icebreaker as they bring this up. But once again, my name is Dr. Kay Thomas, and I'm pleased to present this presentation with my colleague, who is
Jennifer Parsons.
Does this one work? This microphone work too? Yeah, he said that one works.
Oh, and my name is Jennifer Parsons, not to be mistaken with Jessica Parsons. And fun fact, in 1980, I believe, popular name number 1 was Jennifer, and popular name number 2 was Jessica, so it is a common mistake.
Awesome. So thank you guys for attending this presentation this afternoon. So what we're going to be doing today is just giving an overview of what you see here on the screen, looking at recruitment strategies, marketing and representation, support systems, and scholarship and funding. And just a quick story about how we came to be. Yes, we're both in the SEC, but I do research on social networks, and so I had a colleague who reached out to me. My colleague actually in the Honors College had said, hey, Mississippi's doing some pretty cool things and how they're recruiting minority students for scholarships, knowing my frustration at the university. And so got us connected, and from there we realized we had some things in common, also some ways we could help each other, and thus led to Jennifer asked me to join her, and hey, how about we present here at NCHC, and here we are on the stage. So there is value in getting to know people and networking in the field.
So just quickly, we want to give a little bit of background about our institution, so it puts the information we share into perspective. And so as you're looking at the figures here on the screen, I just want to share that the Honors College at the University of Mississippi offers a little over 200 classes per semester. We have study abroad funding for up to $5,000 per student, up to $1,000 in research funds per student, and we also offer conference travel funding. For our 4-year students, they're expected to complete 30 honors hours and their capstone experience or thesis. And then for our transfer-in students, they must complete 3 honors hours as well as the thesis. For GPA, it's a 3.2 first year, 3.4 second year, and 3.5 third year. And to graduate, we do not have minimum standardized test scores or GPA for entry, and we omit the standardized test score from our admissions process.
And at the University of South Carolina, most notable for us, we're considered to be the top-ranked public honors college because we offer over 300 classes each semester, as well as, and these are all honors courses. They're taught by full-time faculty in small semester courses. Our largest class probably has maybe about 20 to 25 students, and then our smallest class has between like 6 to 8 students. We also provide some research funding for our students, up to $4,000 during their undergraduate years, and our completion rate is about 82% of an entering class that finishes in honors. And then you can also see our total number of our undergraduate students and our students of color. And then we have a holistic review process that we just started 2 years ago in the Honors College as part of our admissions process.
We want to talk a little bit about recruitment strategies, and I want to be transparent in what has worked for us or what we perceive to work for us, and then what has not worked for us. It may come as no surprise that what has not worked for us is to, at the time 2 years ago, have an older white male dean and someone, myself, go to high schools that are not predominantly white and speak to students of color about honors college opportunities at the University of Mississippi. Frankly, we received a lot of blank stares. There wasn't good connection there, and we felt like it wasn't a good use of time, because at the end of the day, what we have discovered, which is actually quite a no-brainer, is that representation is important. And so in the fall of 2019, we had our recruiter actually start taking current honors students back to their alma maters to be part of the tabling events, and we noticed right off the bat so many more students approaching those tables because they saw students who looked like them. We also find that partnering with bridge programs, like we have one called MOST in the state of Mississippi, is very helpful in our recruiting efforts, especially in the state where the number of Black Mississippians is the highest percentage of anywhere in the United States. It's important for us to try to represent our state as much as possible in the Honors College. We also find that it's important to debunk myths, and so sometimes that requires good communication with the Central Admissions Office, which fortunately we are not beholden to as far as applications coming through to us, but they do talk about us when they're out on the road. And so the importance of not leading a conversation with a student with what is your ACT score when they ask you about scholarship opportunities at the University of Mississippi. So what we need to do, though, especially because, you know, for example, the recruiter taking students back to alma maters is so recent, is that we need to assess the success of doing these kinds of practices.
And then recruitment for us at the University of South Carolina is a challenge because we're not that far along with what we're doing. Our admissions process is in our university's hand, and so the diversity, they have a section of diversity recruitment, but that had been a turnover for every few years. They'd have a new director, new coordinator, so we're getting used to working with new people. But fortunately, the last 2 years, they've had a steady presence of a director, and then working with this person, I've been able to kind of create what that recruitment strategy can be like. The university already had a MOST team, a group of students very similar to Mississippi, where they go back to their high school. So instead of us trying to recreate the real, just creating that recruitment and pushing our students towards that program to go back and talk about honors. And as you can see here too as well, when we're talking about recruitment strategies, you definitely want to have the students, that's probably one of the best practices. One of the pieces of advice we want to share is that the takeaway is having your students tell the story. They can tell the story a lot better than we can, whether you look like them or not. Just recently, we had an alumni event, and our students were telling the story about being the only one in the class. And being the only one, and what does that look like, and being in high school and being able to connect to high school students and let them know that this is what you're going to experience when you come here to the University of South Carolina, but this is also the support that you're going to have too as well. And then the other outreach we've done with recruitment strategies is also like the postcards and the information that gets sent out to students. And that goes to our next slide, but goes to Lease Scholarship and Funding. What do you have for our students there?
How many of you are familiar with the Stamps Foundation? Anybody? Okay. So they support students throughout the U.S. The University of Mississippi is fortunate to have about a dozen incoming stamp students for each year. A few years ago, I was invited to join the selection committee along with a colleague of mine who's also part of the Honors College of the University of Mississippi. And we noticed that out of over a list of 100 candidates for the stamp scholarship, there were about 5 Black students on that list. And so when we asked, what's the deal here? Why aren't there more Black students on this list? It was sort of like, well, these are the students that were submitted to us by the deans and chairs of the various units. And because of the volume of applications to the University of Mississippi and trying to select who might be great for stamps, we had to filter solely based upon standardized test score. And so we said, well, we think we could come up with a few more names. And they were like, well, let's just think about it over this next year of how we might try to reach out to the chairs and to the deans and try to get a more diversified applicant pool. to which we said, just give us 24 hours. And so in the next day or two, we were able to add about a dozen more students to the list who are Black students. And that was by reaching out to colleagues of ours at the university who we knew had good relationships with certain prospective students throughout the state of Mississippi. And so I really believe that as far as enrollment goes, as it's tied to, scholarship and funding, is that you can actually make those changes immediately. Of course, it's important to make sure that you have support systems in place, which we'll talk about in just a minute, so that they thrive once they're there in your honors college or program. But to be told no by an upper level administrator that we can't add any more names, when you know for yourself that's not true, and you have colleagues who could submit those names, sometimes that's what you have to do and say, give me 24 hours and I'll get a more diversified applicant pool.
And I wish I could add more to this slide, but this is one of the reasons why Jen is taking the lead on this, because we do have stamps and McNairs, and we do have scholarships like that at the University of South Carolina, but we do not have a really good process to identify and pull in those minority students so that they make it through, because we've seen the same thing there, and it's a challenge for us. But then working with my colleague here, we figured out a way how we can adapt that type of process here at the University of South Carolina. So maybe in about a year or two, I'll be back here to present about our assessment of what that program, because it's always good to hear what someone else is doing and realizing, yes, you can also kind of make those same changes or know how to network there too. But let's talk about marketing and representation. What does that look like? So here's some examples. Hopefully you guys can see. These are our IG pages, or Instagram for those who have an 11-year-old, so she always keeps me up to date on that. But just some examples of how at our different institutions we have used marketing and representation. I think we're both fortunate to have communications team. I would love to take the credit for some of the things we do here, but we actually have a communications staff in the Honors College that takes the lead on this, and they work directly with our students. And so at the top is our Experience Honors postcard that they created that gets sent out to students, minority students, as well as something that we give our admissions team, so when they're out there recruiting. And then the Instagram page for the Honors College as well. We also have an Instagram page for our Black Honors Caucus students. But on the main page, you can go and visit, and marketing and representation is key because really our students tell the story. You can be out there and talking all about your program, but just really think about how you're using those students. And so we have an honors takeover. And also marketing representation isn't just during those high times. Right now it's application deadline, right? And then you have the yield. But think about marketing 365. Just think about that, because students are constantly looking, or parents are constantly looking at your page. And so how can you use social media and mailing for that?
In 2018, I conducted a series of interviews with some of our Black students in the Honors College, and one student said, I see me in the Honors Report, an annual magazine that we put out, and I also see me on the walls of this building in the picture frames, but I don't see me in the classroom. And so one question that I think it's important for us to kind of pause and ask ourselves from time to time is, in what ways are we not being the most authentic we can be in marketing our honors colleges and programs, and making sure that there's representation when you're scrolling through your phone, but then also representation in the classroom. And so I think the question of, do you have an authenticity issue, is really important. And so it should come as no surprise that in 2018, when I conducted those interviews, that's also the same year that we started the Honors College Minority Engagement Council, and that's where you can barely see there up on the screen in the top right, that's their own Instagram page, and we connect to it frequently from our own maiden page on the Instagram account.
So after you have recruited them and marketed to the students, and you make sure that you have funding available, you need to also make sure you have support systems in place. My background is student affairs, and if you know anything about student services and student development theory, a lot of the things has to come from the students. You can create the student organizations, and in the SEC, we have usually an annual honors deans conference, and a couple of years ago, we were listening to our colleagues talk about these student minority groups that they had started, or their students had started, and we were fortunate that we had a group of Black honor students who wanted to create the same, and once we got them on board, they took off running. And so that's one of our last takeaways, is just making sure that you have the student support. And so here in the Honors College, we have the a diversity council as well that just got started, but we have a Black Honors Caucus, and we also utilize some things we have in place, making sure that you have that diversity in some of your regular student leadership positions. Like we have peer mentors. We both have peer mentors and first-generation student networking or networks for those students to fall into place. And sometimes you don't think about that. Like when you're looking across the landscape of who your students are and what they see, also think about who are they seeing in the classroom as well as in some of these leadership positions. Oh, and just a couple of little things on there. Making sure inviting them to special events and campus partnerships too. So we have a few minutes left. We want to make sure we didn't take up too much time, also leave time for questions. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I want to give a story as to a lot of the things I shared are things that we're doing like now in the last year or two. But also to be real and be authentic, this is Louise Rice. And she's my advisee, and she's a senior this year, and she was our Truman nominee last year. And the reason why we're ending with this is a story of how you may not be getting it right now, but if you can convince the student to come here, this is where it can lead to. So Louise, when she was a high school, she's from Lexington, South Carolina, and in a room just like this, at the time, so this is 2018, we would do these Meet the NCHC events, and I would only see maybe one, if even lucky, a student who looked like me. And so at this event, my colleague comes up to me and he says, hey, I need you to meet this student. And she's like, she's a Black female. I said, where was she? I didn't see her here because I received like 400 kids. And I went up to her and she said, I'm going to Georgetown. I'm going here, I'm going there. And just by talking to her, I said, no, you need to come right here to the University of South Carolina. Because I don't know. And her dad was convinced. So long story short, was able to convince her. And I said, if you come here, I promise you, because I could feel, I told her, so you're going to be Truman. You can be Truman, you can be Goldwater. I just feel it, I know it. And 3 years later, she was our Truman nominee. But we didn't get it right with Louise when she was a prospective student. But since her time here, we've been trying to get it right since then, of all the things that we shared here. And that just shows an example because about 3 weeks ago, she was in my office for an advising appointment, and I said, hey, so now we're working with admissions and some of this recruiting that we've never done before. And I need you to help me write a letter about your experience. So we're not sending out a letter from me, we're sending out a letter from a student. And so together we crafted a letter, and that is what prospective students receive to attend some of our virtual events. And the letter is just, if you want to get a copy of it, you can just email me, but it's just an amazing, because in that advising appointment, I said, do you think you would have this experience at Georgetown? And she's like, no. The things I've experienced, the things I've been able to do here, and I could tell you all about the things she's done. And so I just kind of wanted to end on that because when it's all said and done, what we're trying to do at our respective institutions is get them here. Get them to graduate, get them to persist, bring them here, but we also want to make sure they have the support systems in place so they can get that diploma and that degree. Thank you, guys.